begin with the border standoff that turned violent today. Clashes broke out at an EU border checkpoint when Polish forces used water cannon and tear gas to push back migrants attempting to enter from Belarus. The European Union has approved more sanctions against the Belarusian government to punish it for creating this crisis. The EU accuses Belarus of trafficking potential asylum seekers from the Middle East to the border with Poland.
An outburst of violence after days of mounting tension. Polish authorities say they fired water cannon and tear gas after migrants threw stones and attempted to destroy a fence. Hundreds have massed at this closed crossing, just some of the several thousand stranded on the Belarus-Poland border in freezing temperatures, their frustration expressed with each hurled stone.
It is night. It is night. We here sleep in forest, in cold, in Hungary. We waiting to Europa open way, but them not let anyone to help us. If them give us gas and paper, we will give them stone.
The Polish reaction gave the Russian foreign minister a chance to lecture the European Union about human rights.
The behavior of the Polish side is unacceptable. I think the water cannon, the tear gas, and shots over the migrants' heads towards Belarus, all of it reflects a desire to hide their own actions. And they must understand that they are violating all thinkable norms of international and humanitarian law.
As the situation escalates, so too does the diplomacy. Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko held a call with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, claiming he doesn't want confrontation.
As I told Merkel, the problem is that if we don't save these people, we will both lose. Both Belarus and, to an even bigger extent, the European Union, which doesn't let the refugees through to its territory. That is why we need to urgently make a decision about them.
The EU and its allies blame Belarus for sparking a crisis. EU defense ministers met in Brussels with NATO, raising the prospect of a military response.
Of course, we are deeply concerned about the way the Lukashenko regime is using vulnerable migrants as a hybrid tactic against other countries, and this is actually putting the life of the migrants at risk.
And this is the human cost. At least 11 people have died in recent weeks. The latest, a 19-year-old Syrian man who drowned trying to cross a river into the EU, laid to rest by members of Poland's small Muslim community. They say...
Okay, guys, I'm going to stop right there for just 1 second here. Yeah, we really need to be in prayer for these people. It's an atrocity of what's happening. And I also want to say that if you didn't see my last video, please go and check it out. I had to redo the pinned comment that I put out because I wanted to explain a little bit better about what's going on over there. And please reread that pinned comment in my last video. All this goes hand in hand, y'all. All of it goes hand in hand together, what's going on. They're even saying that the people in Iraq are part of this group of the migrants and from Syria. And, well, you know, the U.S. has something to do with that too. And, you know, we know who. But anyways, I just wanted to say some of your comments aren't coming through. And, well, that's just the way it's been here for me for about eight or 9 months. But please, if you don't see your comment, maybe you want to re-comment, or if you haven't looked at that pinned comment that I put there, please go read it. Please go read it so you can understand where all of this ties in together, okay? Anyways, let's resume this.
They fear he won't be the last migrant. They have Very.
And for more of this, I'm joined now by our correspondent, Terry Schultz. She is following events for us from Brussels. Good evening to you, Terry. We have seen the most violence, the most violent clashes in this border standoff so far today. What has been the reaction from the European Union?
Well, Brent, perhaps not surprisingly, the EU and NATO are much less vocal about violations of human rights in their own member countries than they are in others. These pictures must be making EU and NATO officials very uncomfortable. Poland's actions, of course, are not what anyone would like to see from an EU country. But at the same time, everyone in this town, in Brussels, remains unified behind the message that it was Belarus that caused this situation. And never mind that now it's the migrants on the other end of the water cannons. The blame remains on Minsk. And that's the message they're sticking to so far. I wouldn't doubt, and I would even hope, that some private messages are being passed to the Polish government, asking them to be judicious in their use of strong-arm tactics like that. I mean, for one reason, as you heard Foreign Minister Lavrov, it certainly gives Russians and other adversaries something to talk about.
You say the blame remains on Minsk, and yet we heard that the leader of Belarus, Lukashenko, had a phone call with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel yesterday. Did that conversation, did it raise a few eyebrows in the European Union?
It did. Angela Merkel did tell the other EU leaders that she was going to make this call, so it didn't come as a surprise. They didn't find out about it in the headlines. But for example, some Estonian politicians said this was the wrong way to handle this. No EU leader has spoken with Lukashenko since August 2020, since those disputed elections when the EU agreed with the opposition that Lukashenko had stolen the election, that he wasn't a legitimate leader. So no one else has bestowed this legitimacy upon him of giving him a phone call until Chancellor Merkel. So at the moment, I think that people are waiting to see if any good comes out of this call. But as I said, there are people who think that no one on this side of that border should be speaking with Alexander Lukashenko at the moment.
Yeah, it is interesting that the German Chancellor spoke with Alexander Lukashenko when this crisis was erupting. The first person that Merkel phoned was the Russian President Vladimir Putin. All of this begs the question tonight, Terry. Does the European Union, does it have a clear plan on how to bring this crisis to an end?
You know, we've spoken about this several times, Brent, and the plan that the EU is putting in place does seem to be having some effect. You know, the first thing that they're doing this week is to go directly to capitals and ask them to stop the flights, stop people from getting on the flights, to add to people piling up at the borders there. And in fact, we have seen airlines in Iraq, in Syria, in Qatar, the UAE, in Turkey. Many of these hubs are now saying they will no longer allow people to get on flights to Minsk because it's obvious that they're going to come to no good end there. That doesn't solve the problem of the people who are now on the border, the people that we're seeing now in this, you know, tug of war between Belarus and Poland. And it really isn't clear now how this will turn out. These people have to go somewhere before they can be repatriated, if that's going to be how the countries handle it. But at the moment, it's getting very cold and they're in a very, very difficult position.
Our correspondent, Terry Schultz, with the latest tonight from Brussels. Terry, as always, thank you. And I'm joined now by Olga Drindova. She is the editor of Belarus Analysis. It's good to have you on the program. Let's look at what's happening on the border right now. Is Belarus now at war with the European Union, a gray war that is taking place on its border, and the weapons that it's using are refugees?
Well, I'm not sure we can call it a war. Anyway, it's a kind of a method of blackmailing the European Union, and there are at least three aims that Lukashenko might try to reach. First, he's trying to more or less split the European Union, that it doesn't speak with one voice. The second is well, he might try to get back his international legitimacy that he lost in August last year, and obviously also to some kind, to shift a focus, so to say, from the human rights violations inside of Belarus to some other topics like migration crisis on the border between Belarus and Poland. These are the aims of him, and I should say that some of them have more or less been reached. I mean, we're now talking about the crisis on the borders. We're talking less about the political situation in Belarus, and he also spoke to Merkel on the phone by the Belarusian state media. It was presented as kind of acceptance of his legitimacy, but we still see at the same time that the European Union is at least trying to speak up with one voice and help Poland in this situation. So I don't think we should expect that the sectoral sanctions that were introduced a couple of months ago against Belarus, they would be abolished because of this crisis. I think this is more or less the hope in Minsk now.
A few days ago, Belarus threatened to block or to stop all gas flowing across its territory into Western Europe. Do you see that threat, that decision, as one that is being supported by Russian President Vladimir Putin? I mean, Lukashenko says that, but would he be saying that if he didn't have the backing of the Kremlin?
Well, we don't really know where this plan of a migration crisis comes from, whether it comes from Minsk or from Moscow. We just don't have facts for that. But from the other hand, we understand that without an acceptance of Moscow, this would not have been happening right now. So I think even it was not their plan, at least there is still some red line that has not been reached by Lukashenko for the Russian president. At the same time, I don't really think that it's in interest of Russia to really become part of this military escalation between Belarus and the European Union, since Russia has also some military obligations towards Belarus, and we know that Poland is a member of NATO. So I think it's just observing with interest how the European Union can react to such a crisis and what happens within the European Union. But I think there is still some red line that maybe has already been reached, because we know that Merkel talked to Lukashenko after she talked on the phone with Putin.
Yeah, well, the story is fluid. We will see where things develop. Olga Drindova, the editor at Belarus Analysm. We appreciate your insights tonight, Olga. Thank you.